Before I tell you what happened that night, let me say this. Clearly, if I had ignored my son for even 2 more minutes, neither of us would be alive today. So, if you're listening right now, stay with me. This isn't a story you can step away from halfway through. It was a Thursday evening, ordinary in every way. I had just dropped my wife off at the airport for a short business trip. She kissed my cheek, adjusted her coat, and walked into the terminal without looking back. She traveled often. Nothing about it felt unusual. Rain tapped against the windshield. As I pulled away, I reached for the radio, ready to head home. That's when my son grabbed my arm. Not a tapper grip, Dad, he said, his voice shaking. Please don't go home tonight. I looked at him. In the rearview mirror, Evan, 8 years old, quiet, observant, the kind of child adults underestimate because he doesn't demand attention. His face was pale. His eyes were wide, not panicked. Focused. What do you mean? I asked gently. You're tired, buddy. He shook his head. I know something about Mum, he said. You have to believe me. This time, because there had been other times, a car parked across the street 3 nights in a row. A phone call he overheard after midnight. The way his mother's voice changed when she thought no one was listening. Each time I explained it, a way-stressed imagination, a child filling silence with theorem and engineer. I trust logic, patterns, proof. But sitting there in the rain, his hand shaking on my arm, I saw something logic couldn't explain. Fear not, worry not, nerves fear. Slowed at the intersection. Home was 20 minutes north. House I designed myself, a place I believed was siphoned. Then I did the calculation that changed everything. If I believed him and he was wrong, we'd lose one night. If I didn't believe him and he was right, I changed lanes. Okay? I said quietly, I believe you. The relief on his face told me everything. If stories like this matter to you, real moments, real warnings, real consequences, consider subscribing to the channel. These stories aren't entertainment theory lessons. People only understand after it's too late. I parked across the street from our house beneath the shadow of 2 tall trees. We waited at 10:47 p.m. Our van rolled down the block with its headlights off. It stopped in front of our house. 2 men stepped out, hooded, reached for my phone. Then one of them pulled out a key. My key. The door opened without resistance. That's them, Evan whispered. The people Mum talked to. And then I smelled its sharp chemicals. Seconds later, light exploded behind the windows. Fire. Not an accident, not a mistakey plan. I pulled my son close as flames swallowed the house I built to protect us. And if you think this is the worst part, it isn't, because what I learned next was far more terrifying than the fire itself. And once you hear it, you'll understand why some warnings can never be ignored again. We stayed where we were long after the flames climbed high enough to turn night into day. Sirens echoed from somewhere far away. Evan pressed his face into my jacket, shaking while I watched the house I had designed burn in a way that made no sense. Wild, not uneven to controlled, to precise. This wasn't an accident. It was deliberate only. Then did I understand how close I had come to making the worst decision of my life. If I had driven home like I always did, if I had told my son he was imagining things again, there wouldn't have been time to wake up. There wouldn't have been a chance. Firefighters arrived and neighbors gathered. Something else surfaced. A realization that had been forming quietly for months. Evan hadn't suddenly become afraid that night. He had been afraid for a long time. The warnings replayed in my mind, sharper now. The car he mentioned, parked across the street 3 nights in a row. Always in a different spot, always gone by morning. The phone call he overheard after midnight. My wife's voice, low, urgent, cut off the moment footsteps approached the locked office door. The way she flinched when I touched the handle. The questions she asked later that week, not curious questions, specific ones about gas flow, pressure points, how long it takes before a system becomes unstable. I had answers for everything. That was my mistake. Explained instead of observing. I solved instead of listening. I looked down at Evan. His eyes were open now, not crying, watching, studying the fire, as if trying to understand what it meant. You okay, buddy? I asked quietly. He nodded, then shook his head. I told you because I was scared you wouldn't come back. That sentence hit harder than the flames. Not scared of the dark, not scared of monsters, scared of monsters. Of losing MeWe, left before anyone could stop Usby, for questions started before explanations were expected. I drove to a small motel near the airport and paid cash. I didn't use my cardie. Didn't give a last name. Evan fell asleep almost instantly exhausted. Finally, winning, I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, lights on, listening to every sound in the hallway. That's when the final piece settled into place. My wife had an alibi. She was already on a plane. Cameras would show her entering the Pazistry, sits timestamps, all clean, all intentional, which meant what I had witnessed wasn't just violence, it was coordination. I stepped into the bathroom and stared at my reflection, barely recognizing the man looking back, a husband who had trusted Routine, a father who had almost trusted it too much. Around 3 a.m. my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Are you home yet? My stomach dropped. That message wasn't concern, it was confirmation. Someone was checking whether the plan had worked. I turned the phone face down, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I understood something clearly. Now whoever did this hadn't acted alone, and they hadn't failed by accident. Made myself a promise right there in that motel room. I would not confront anyone, yet he would not accuse without proof. I would not underestimate what I was dealing with. If someone had tried to erase us once, they wouldn't hesitate to try again. Evan had saved our lives by paying attention when I stopped doing that. Now it was my turn, and the next step wasn't emotionally, was deliberate, because the truth leaves a trail, and I was done pretending not to see it. Morning came without relief. The motel room smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. Evan slept curled on his side, one arm wrapped around the pillow, like he was holding on to something solid. I watched his chest rise and fall, and felt the guilt settle deeper. He had trusted me with a fear too big for his age, and I had almost ignored it. I stepped outside to make a call, keeping my voice low. The fire department confirmed what I already knew. The house was a total loss. Cause undetermined. Investigation ongoing. Undetermined meant time, and time meant risk. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. What I had was instinct, not evidence. And instinct doesn't survive interrogation. So I went back to the beginning. The key. I couldn't shake the image of one of the men pulling it from his pocket. The quiet click of the deadbolt. No forced entry. No hesitation. There were only 3 keys to that house. Mine, the spare in the lockbox inside my wife's office, and hers. The lockbox code had never changed. I thought about her office door, always locked lately. The questions she'd asked over dinner, framed as concern. How often she reminded me to double-check the gas system, like she was memorizing it. Patterns. Engineers live by patterns. I woke Evan gently and told him we were going out for breakfast. Somewhere public. Somewhere safe. He didn't ask questions. Children don't. When they know something is wrong, over pancakes. He spoke quietly, like the truth might hear him. She said she'd leave it where they told her. He said, who told her? I asked. He shrugged. The man on the phone. The one she called. See? That was the first time I heard a name, or at least a letter. Later that morning, I dropped Evan at a friend's house. Someone I trusted without explanation. Then I drove back to the airport parking garage. Her car was still there, same spot, same silver SUV. I unlocked it with the emergency spare. She didn't know. I kept at first. Everything looked normal, to normal. Then I smelled it, not strong. Just wrong. Chemical, the same faint scent from the night before. I searched slowly, methodically, glove box, center console. Under the seats, my fingers brushed plastic beneath the passenger seat. Phone, cheap, unfamiliar, a burner. I turned it on, one contact. Saved C. My hands started to shake as I opened the messages. Short, cold, precise. Leave the key under the mat. Thursday night. No mistakes. It'll look like a system failure. His design? You'll be on camera. Clean alibi. I scrolled. Each line tightened my chest. Then I read the one that made me slide back against the seat. What about the kid? Collateral, necessary. I stopped breathing. My son wasn't a complication. He was expendable. I photographed everything. Every message, every timestamp, withdrawal receipts, insurance paperwork, diagrams of my own work marked in red. She hadn't just betrayed me, she had studied me. I closed the car door and leaned against it. Nausea rising. The life I thought I knew collapsed into something unrecognizable. This wasn't anger anymore. This was clarity. Someone hadn't tried to scare us, they had tried to end us, and now I had proof, but proof alone wasn't enough. Because truth only matters when it's undeniable, and the next step would be far more dangerous than searching a car. I was going to have to let her talk, and hope she said enough to save us for good. I didn't confront her right away. That was the hardest part. Pretending nothing had changed, while everything inside me had shattered. I needed to understand how deep this went, how carefully it had been staged, and whether anyone else was involved. From a block away, I watched the street fill with flashing lights, fire trucks, police cruisers, neighbors in coats and slippers, hands covering their mouths. The house collapsed inward with a sound that felt final. Then my phone buzzed. A rideshare notification. She was back. The car pulled up near the curb, and my wife stepped into the chaos like she'd rehearsed it, hair loose, face pale. Her heels clicked too loudly on the pavement as she ran toward the tape. "My family," she cried. "My husband and my son." A police officer caught her gently by the arm before she could get too close. She folded into him, sobbing. Shaking grief performed so convincingly that for half a second, I doubted myself. Then, I saw her eyes. They weren't searching the house, they were searching the crowd she wasn't looking for. She was checking whether anyone had found us. The fire chief spoke calmly. "We haven't located anyone yet." The fire was extremely intense. I watched her reaction closely. Not grief, fear. It flashed across her face, quick, sharp, then vanished, replaced by another wave of tears. "They were home," she said loudly. "He texted me, good night." Something went cold in my chest. She was building the story in real time. I typed with shaking fingers and sent a message from Evans. Watched to her phone, stopped for late dinner. Heading home soon. Her phone buzzed. I watched the color drain from her face. She looked down, read it. Then looked up again, eyes wild now, scanning the darkness between parked cars and trees. She knew we were alive, and for the first time since this began. She was afraid. I drove away slowly, lights off, heart pounding. Evans slept against the door. Exhausted, I didn't wake him. He didn't need to see this part yet. Back at the motel, I made a call I never thought I'd have to make. To a woman my father once told me to trust if things ever went truly wrong. A lawyer, quiet, relentless. The kind who didn't bluff. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said one sentence that changed everything. "Don't go to the police yet." I swallowed. "Why?" "Because right now," she said, "you have suspicion and partial proof. What you need is a confession." A confession. She explained it carefully. The texts could be challenged. The phone could be questioned. The fire could be framed as an accident, unless someone said otherwise out loud. "She thinks you're dead," the lawyer said. "That's leverage." The plan was simple, terrifying, precise. We would meet her in public. Cameras everywhere. People everywhere. No shouting. No accusations, just questions. Let her explain what she believed had already succeeded. If she spoke freely, it would be over. If she didn't, we'd walk away and regroup. I didn't sleep that night. I watched Evan breathe, steady, safe, and felt the weight of how close we came to losing everything. The messages replayed in my mind. The diagrams. The word collateral echoing louder than anything else. By morning, the fear had hardened into something else. Resolved, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure the truth didn't disappear with the ashes of my home. And as the sun rose over the motel parking lot, I understood something clearly. The next conversation I had with my wife would decide whether we could ever be safe again. I just hoped She would talk. Enough. We chose a place she couldn't control, laid crowded cafe near the airport. Glass all stainless steel cameras visible from every angle, people coming and going, buses overlapping, no corners to hide in. She arrived late, not rushed, not alone. Told me she believed the worst was over. She spotted me immediately. Her step slowed, then steadied when she reached the table. Her face folded into relief, so convincing it almost hurt to watch. Oh my God. She whispered, reaching for my hands, I thought you were. I pulled my hands back gently. Evan sat beside me, quiet eyes fixed on the table. She glanced at him once, long enough to confirm he was alive. Then she smiled. I've been worried sick, she said. Her voice carried just enough for nearby tables to hear. The police told me the fire was terrible. I nodded. It was. She waited. Sympathy, gratitude. Teresa gave her silence after a moment. She filled it herself. I keep thinking, she said softly, if you'd just come home like usual. I leaned forward slightly. Why Thursday night? Her smile faltered. What? Why that night? I asked calmly. Not Tuesday, not Friday. She blinked. I don't know what you're talking about. I slid my phone across the table, not to her, close enough for her to see. Burner phone messages enlarged, clear. Her breath caught just one sigh. Didn't accuse Harry, didn't raise my voice. I asked questions. Why did someone have my key? Why were my system diagrams marked? Why was my name listed as the cause? She laughed softly and shook her head. You've been through a trauma, she said. Stress does strange things to memory. I nodded. It does. I tapped the screen. And this, I said. Were you asked what would happen if Evan was there? She froze. The cafe noise, faded cups clinked. Someone laughed too loudly near the counter. Her voice dropped. You shouldn't have gone through my car. Why not? I asked. Because it explains everything. She leaned back, now's narrowing, the mask slipping. You don't understand, she said quietly. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, I replied. She exhaled sharply. The first real crack. You never listened, she said. You never stopped. Everything was your systems, your logic, your control. This was supposed to end it cleanly, I repeated. She looked at Evan, then really looked at him. He wouldn't have felt anything, she said. It would have been fast. Something inside me went completely still. I pressed record. She noticed too late. You planned it, I said evenly. You planned the cameras, you planned the fire, you planned to blame me. Her lips pressed thin. They said it would look like an accident. They, I asked. She hesitated. Just long enough. Who helped you? I asked again. Her jaw tightened. My father handled it, she said. The timing, the people, the logistics, that was enough. Stood slowly, my hands steady in a way they hadn't been since the fire van slid his small hand into mine. I won't be speaking to you again, I said. Not without my attorney. Her face drained of color as we walked away. She said my name once, not angry, not pleading, panicked. Outside, the air felt cleaner than it had indoors. I sent the recording to my lawyer before we reached the car. The truth was no longer fragile. It was documented, and once truth is documented, it doesn't matter how powerful the lie was, only how long it takes to collapse, because the next time we saw each other it wouldn't be across a cafe table. It would be in a courtroom. Courtrooms are quieter than people expect. No shouting, no drama, just the slow, careful peeling back of lies. We sat on the hard wooden bench. Evan's feet didn't quite touch the floor. His small hand was wrapped tightly around mine. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked tired. Like a child who had grown older in a matter of days. The prosecutor laid everything out piece by piece. The burner phone, the messages, the diagrams marked in red, the recorded conversation from the cafe, not rushed, not emotional, methodical. My wife sat across the room, perfectly still. Her lawyer leaned in once, whispered something, then stopped. There was nothing left to whisper. When the recording played, the room changed. Her voice filled the speakers, calm, detached, precise, talking about the fire like it was a scheduling problem. Talking about my son like he was an inconvenience. I didn't look at her. I watched the judge. I watched. The moment disbelief turned into certainty. The defense tried. They always do. They talked about stress, about marital tension, About misunderstandings taken out of context, they questioned my judgment, suggested I was emotional. That trauma had clouded my memory. Then the prosecutor asked one question. Why was the defendant's father paying 2 men in cash the week before the fire? Silence. Bank records appeared on the screen. Withdrawals, dates, amounts, surveillance. Images from ATMs. Faces, partially hidden, but familiar enough. Her father lowered his eyes. That was it. No dramatic confession. No breakdown. Just the quiet collapse of a story that depended on everyone else staying confused. When the judge spoke, his voice was even. There is sufficient evidence to proceed on charges of conspiracy, arson, and attempted homicide. Attempted homicide. The words didn't feel real until Evan squeezed my hand. She's going away, right? He whispered. Yes, I said softly. She can't hurt anyone anymore. As they led her out, she finally looked at us, not with anger, with calculation, like she was already shaping the next version of the story. But this time, no one was listening. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter, like we'd stepped out of a long shadow. Reporters waited, cameras raised, questions ready. I turned away. This wasn't for them. We got into the car and drove in silence. After a while, Evan spoke. Dad, are we safe now? I took a breath. Yes, I said. We are. He nodded. Watching the world pass by, I'm glad you believed me. That sentence broke something open inside me, because the truth is, he had been brave long before I was. He spoke when it was uncomfortable. When it was risky. When the person he was warning me about was someone he was supposed to trust. I'd spent my life believing adults were the protectors. That day, I learned something else. Sometimes, children are the alarm system. That night, back at the motel, Evan fell asleep quickly, peacefully, for the first time since this began. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to his breathing, and felt the weight of what we had survived settle in. The house was gone. The marriage was gone. The life I thought I knew was gone. But something else was still here, US, and that mattered more than anything we lost. What I didn't know yet was how survival would change us, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Because stopping the danger is only the beginning. Learning how to live after it, that's the part no one prepares you for.
Life doesn't reset after something like that. It reshapes. In the weeks after the court hearings, everything moved slowly. Paperwork, temporary housing, counseling appointments that felt too quiet at first. The world expected relief, closure, gratitude. What we felt instead was adjustment. Evan slept with the light on for a while. Not because he was afraid of the dark, but because silence made his thoughts louder. I sat with him most nights, reading, or just being there, learning how to let quiet feel gentle again. We didn't rush to rebuild a house. We didn't rush to explain anything to anyone who asked. Some things don't need a public version. What mattered was learning how to live, without constantly checking exits. Therapy helped. Not the dramatic kind. The patient kind. The kind where a child learns that telling the truth doesn't make him responsible for what adults do with it. The kind where a father admits he ignored his instincts because routine felt safer than confrontation. That was the hardest truth for me. I had trusted systems more than signals, logic more than intuition, and it nearly cost us everything. Evan never said, "I told you so." He didn't need to. His calm after the storm said enough. One evening, months later, we stood near the empty lot, where our house once stood. The ground was cleared now, grass starting to grow. He kicked a small stone and looked up at me. "Are we going to build again?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "But not right away." He nodded. "That's okay," he said. "I like where we are." So did I. We built routines instead. Morning walks. Homework at the small kitchen table in our rental. Weekend projects that had nothing to do with fixing what was broken. Just making something new. The fear didn't disappear. It softened. It became something we recognized. instead of something that controlled us. People still ask me how I knew when to listen. The truth is, I didn't know. I chose to believe when it mattered most. And belief, real belief, isn't blind. It's attentive. Children notice patterns adults dismiss. They feel tension adults rationalize. They speak up before they learn how dangerous silence can be. Evan saved our lives because he refused to stay quiet. I saved us because I finally listened. If there's anything this experience left me with, it's this. Pay attention when someone you love grows suddenly serious. Listen when warnings come softly, not loudly, and never assume safety is permanent just because it feels familiar. We didn't survive because we were lucky. We survived because one small voice was taken seriously, and because sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is admit they don't have all the answers. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause, or think of someone you should listen to more closely, consider subscribing. These stories aren't about fear. They're about awareness. And before you go, tell me where you're watching from. It means more than you think. Thank you for staying until the end.